Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
And hello again, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us. Leadership changes at the top of state government just around the corner. The 8 years of Asa Hutchinson's administration will end come January, and a new governor will take the oath. So will a new General Assembly, all 135 members on the south end of the Capitol. Perhaps as many as 1/3 of the 35 senators could be new to the chamber, which already has chosen a new president. On the opposite end of the third floor, the House will continue to be led by its newly re-elected Speaker. Both chambers will be overwhelmingly Republican, yes, and if that isn't new, will the issues be? We're joined now by the Senate President-Designate, Bart Hester of Cave Springs, and also Speaker Matthew Shepard of El Dorado. Gentlemen, thanks very much for being with us. Mr. Speaker, let me begin with you. And I want to put this question to both of you, but we've just concluded a legislative session about a $6 billion budget. Are you satisfied with it? Are you at all concerned? Mr. Speaker, we'll start with you about the pressures of inflation.
Well, I think that obviously you have to be concerned about inflation and where we sit, not just here in Arkansas, but across the board. But when it comes to the budgeting process and the budget that was produced in the fiscal session, I'm very pleased with the product. I think it reflects the fact that we were able to hold growth relatively in check. I think the budget grew by about 2.9%, but we also have seen that we've had increasing revenue. And so, always we're going to be concerned about inflation, but when it comes to the budget itself, I think that we did a pretty good job there at the state capitol. The
question, Mr. Speaker, though, is can inflation potentially move us into a recession, and what would the impact be? Are you still confident the Revenue Stabilization Act would handle that?
I think so. I think that even going back to COVID, we saw the value of the Revenue Stabilization Act and how that was utilized 2 years ago when we had a bit of a downturn as we went into the COVID pandemic. And so in Arkansas, I think we're very fortunate that we do use a revenue stabilization mechanism that provides for a balanced budget, but also allows and provides a safeguard in the event that there is a downturn in terms of our revenue and the way that various categories are funded, and that if for some reason we don't have the revenue that we otherwise anticipated, that then that just the RSA ratchets down. But again, keeps the state in a positive situation where the budget remains balanced.
Yeah, Mr. President, or President-Designate, you as comfortable as the Speaker?
I'm very comfortable. Right? We've been really responsible over the last few years on the Senate side, led by Senator Jonathan Dismaying on the budget and Senator Hickey as far as the President, on being conservative, working well with the House. We've got over $1 billion in savings. We estimate to have a $500 million surplus at the end of June. We've done a really good job saving money in case we have an economic downturn. We're going to be prepared for the people to take care of the basic services that we've committed to the people of Arkansas to provide.
Do you see a different legislative agenda, or what do you see as the legislative agenda if there is such a singular thing, Senator, come January?
Look, I think we're going to see a lot of the same things, and those are we need to continue to do better in our education systems. Arkansas continues to lag towards the bottom. We got to do better, and sometimes that's thinking differently. We've got to do better with our healthcare systems, as far as we've got to be able to find a way to encourage, educate, and license more nurses and doctors and people in the healthcare field. So I think those two areas are going to be always talked about. They'll continue to be talked about.
Well, there has been criticism of the General Assembly and the executive, to be fair about it, over the last several years for concentrating more on tax cuts than on putting additional revenues into education, particularly. Your response?
Well, the response is we have to have some cash reserves for when a downtime comes, and we've budgeted physically responsibly on that. And I think we all know that at some point the downturn is going to come. Just like in our own homes, we try to save some money back for the tough times instead of spending where we want to. Thanks to what we've done, I'm very pleased with where we're at.
Well, with revenues rolling in as they have been, even despite COVID, there was criticism that perhaps the tax cuts were ill-advised, particularly the last round. You supported them.
Well,
as did the General Assembly.
That's right. Well, we support the tax cuts because we know when done in a responsible way, it continues to encourage investment in Arkansas and drive growth, which broadening the base increases the tax revenue coming in. So we continue to do that. It's continuing to work really well. We don't know how much of it is just federal government coming in and how much of it is just we're doing well. What we know is we're doing well.
Well, yeah, there were, in fact, billions coming in from the federal government over the last 2 years.
That's right. But we're confident that even though that was so much, that was devastating on our federal balanced budget, right, or lack thereof, it's been really good for Arkansas's balanced budget, which is our responsibility.
Yeah, and we took the money.
Of course.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, your thoughts?
Well, Senator Hester makes a lot of great points. Going back to your question about are we in a secure position? Think about we have a $1.2 billion, what is now called catastrophic reserve fund. I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago that we were hopeful to get up to about, I think it was up to 700 million is what we're trying to get to. Ends up, we're now at 1.2 billion, which is roughly 20% of the budget, which is something that has been somewhat of a goal of ours to try and have that just in case of any kind of downturn. And then when it comes back to the point you made about there is a lot of federal money coming in, when we rolled out this last round of tax cuts, one of the things we did last fall is we brought a consultant on board to take a look at that because there was a lot of concern on both ends from the House and the Senate. We wanted to cut taxes, but we also wanted to make sure we were doing so in a responsible way. And so that's where you see the plan that came together that provides for tax relief. At the lower level, some Arkansans are no longer going to have to pay any taxes. And then it provides that there is a bit of a safety net as we move towards a top rate of 4.9%. And then even with all that taking place, with regard to education and healthcare, there's still much more to be done. But my recollection is, I think in the last regular session, that we made the largest percentage increase in educational funding, that's the largest increase percentage-wise that's ever been over the last 15 years. And so there's still more work to be done, but I'm really proud of the work that we have done, and we've been able to build up a reserve, cut taxes, invest more in education, and then there's plenty of other things that need to be done, and we've invested in broadband, and I anticipate that we'll have more investment there. But I've been very pleased with the work that we've done over the last several years.
Let me go back to Senator Hester for a second. Sir, when you say improvements to education or continued improvements to education, what do you have in mind?
Well, obviously more funding is always important, but
Sure.
I think choice. We've got to give parents of not just kids of parents that are wealthy, right? Wealthy kids already have choice. We got to give kids from lower income families better choice in Arkansas.
Well, that inevitably, does it not, mean less funding for public schools, the public school sector?
Well, I don't think so at all. Like I said, we have plenty of funding.
Are you talking
right
about
now.
tax credits now, Senator?
Yeah, I'm talking about tax credit scholarships for lower income students. We have to really focus on what's important, and it's educating the student. By far and away, the majority and masses of kids from Arkansas are best suited in a public school setting. Not all students are. All students aren't created the same. They think differently, act differently, walk differently, talk differently, and we should offer them more options.
Why not do that through the public schools?
Well, I think anytime different options are better, right? We have public schools, we have charter public schools, which are doing that and doing it very successfully in Arkansas. I think private schools, homeschooling, are also very, very successful models that we should continue to look in and hopefully allow students those other options as well.
Mr. Speaker, let me go back to you. You concur with your colleague regarding additional funding for options, vouchers, vouchers, credits.
I think we have to look at each of the specific proposals. I think you've seen over the last number of years there have been several different options that have been made available, and I think that we've seen since we came into the majority that we've tried to provide additional options across the board. One of the things for me that particularly being a representative from South Arkansas is also trying to understand and figure out how do we deal with some of the disparities that exist across the state. I mean, there's a lot of differences just in terms of teacher pay and otherwise between South and East Arkansas and maybe other areas of the state. And so, I think that when it comes to education, you have to look at a number of different things, a number of different proposals. At the end of the day, you try to do what do we believe is in the best interest of the students of the state of Arkansas. And so, that could be additional funding, could be additional, funding for teacher salaries, which we've done over the last several years. We've made advances to increase starting pay for teachers, which is also ultimately, I think led to higher pay when it comes to teachers. But there's still clearly much more to be done. And so when it comes to education, I think we have to look at a number of different options and have the discussion. As you pointed out, every seat in the General Assembly is up this election cycle, and we're going to have a new administration. And so, undoubtedly, that's a discussion that is very likely to be had over the coming months as we move into the next regular session.
In over the last couple of years, 3, 4 maybe even, we have seen the General Assembly, both chambers, assert itself in a way, with a new vigor, a new spirit, Mr. Speaker. Do you think that's good? Do you see that continuing?
Well, I think that it to some degree will likely continue. I think that one of the things that probably brought more attention to that was just the situation when it came to COVID, and that there were, emergency declarations. There was federal money that was coming down that involved additional action from the General Assembly, and so there were just so many issues that were really brought about by COVID that it really presented a number of issues, and no doubt about it. When you think about 135 legislators, we were hearing from our constituents about concerns, whether it came to, certain rules that may have been relaxed, or the implication of certain laws that were on the books, or certain funding that was being passed on, by way of the federal government through the state. And so it just presented a number of things that we necessarily needed to be a part of and involved with. And, I think there are probably things, as we look back, we went through really an unprecedented event in our state's history. You saw in the last regular session that we passed legislation to modify some of the emergency powers and how those things are handled and the legislature's role. And we worked on that with the executive branch. I mean, I have to give Governor Hutchinson credit on that, is that he worked with us as we worked to revamp, the statutory provisions related there too. But, I think at the end of the day, as the leader of the House, I think it's a very good thing for the legislature to be active and involved. I think that will continue, but I don't know that you'll see it to the extent that we've seen over the past 2 years. And that's just because of the fact that with hopefully turning the corner on COVID, the issues and opportunities may not be as pressing as we've seen over the last number of years. No,
perhaps not as much over the past couple of years, but Mr. President, Senator, some members told me this goes beyond COVID, that the legislative branch, frankly, was just feeling a bit slighted by the executive branch. Your thoughts?
Well, I think anytime a governor's been around for a long time and been able to lead on a bunch of issues that sometimes the legislature didn't agree with much or didn't feel like they had enough input on, there's a rub there. And I think that's a healthy rub. That's by design from the designers of our Constitution, that there's 3 separate but equal branches. So the rub, I think, is healthy. I think it's necessary. I think it should be there to make sure the best policy for the people of Arkansas is there.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me point out that about a quarter century ago now, I think a gentleman from Jonesboro named Bobby Hogue became the first speaker to win re-election to a second term. You're now the first speaker to win a third term as speaker. Do you see the institutional authority of the legislative branch growing in that sense?
I think with the extension of term limits, as we've moved from, particularly on the House end, where when I came in it was 3 2-year terms, and now we've moved to term limits where In some instances, you could serve up to 16 years. I think that with that has aided the role of the legislature and allowed us to be more active and involved. I think that with regard to me, serving a third term as speaker, I don't think that necessarily reflects anything about legislative power or otherwise. I think that I may be situated in kind of a rare place here, that with us still being in a bit of a transition period from relatively short term limits to a longer term limits arrangement, that it kind of allowed this opportunity. And I think also the fact that we, over the last 2 years, so much of what we've dealt with has been focused on COVID. I view that it really is an opportunity. Hopefully, since I was speaker prior to COVID, we had what I think most would agree was a very successful legislative session. What I hope to do is help get us back on track, meaning coming out of COVID, move back to more of business as usual. But undoubtedly, I think the legislature's role has expanded, and I think, to Senator Hester's point, that the rub between the three branches of government, and even the rub between the House and the Senate, that's by design, and it's very healthy. And I think that at the end of the day, it produces better policy for the people of Arkansas.
Well, let's talk about the intra-chamber rub. Senator, there was a bit of a rub a couple of years ago. It was anticipated, by many anyway, that you would be pro tem, and it didn't go the other way, but now you will be the pro tem. Is it possible for you now to consolidate your conference?
Well, I think that's my...
There were some hurt feelings. I mean,
there certainly were, but that's politics, right? And you have to move forward and move on. And right now, I feel like my number one job is making the Senate work well together with people and with every individual. And I will tell you, Senator Hickey he was the right man for the right job 2 years ago. He was tough enough to deal with some really tough issues. I feel like I'm the right man for the job right now. Senator Hickey's been super gracious and helpful, and I feel like we're going to work well together as the body will.
Well, can the minority have a voice? Can you guarantee the minority a voice in legislation? Well, you're overwhelming. Your chamber's overwhelmingly red.
It clearly is. And look, the minority will have a voice, right? A very simple way. If a bill is filed in Arkansas, it is heard, right? Their voice gets to heard. Now, will it have the votes to pass? Depending on what it is, right? But at the end of the day, we always have a voice. Minority, majority, all 35 legislators have a voice. They file a bill. It will get its due day in committee.
You will be then president of the entire Senate and not just a supermajority leader.
Well, my goal is to be president of the entire Senate, to make sure everyone there is felt like they are respected, treated as an equal senator, regardless of what side of the aisle that they are on.
Let me go back to tax policy for just a second, if I may, gentlemen. A leading candidate for governor has advocated a phase out of the state income tax, zero it out eventually. Can Arkansas afford that?
Well, I think it takes strong leadership. I think it takes creative thinking, and I think really just looking at how do we do it. Like, things cost money, right? If we're going to take the money away from income tax, where are we going to get that? Are we going to get it through savings, or are we going to get it through charging somewhere else? Like, you look at Texas, they have 0% income tax, but what they charge businesses for their annual licenses are huge compared to Arkansas.
Well, their property
taxes are huge.
Staggering.
That's right. So there's a lot of different ways. If you take it away from one place, you have to get it from somewhere else. So look, we're going to deal with a lot of smart people who are going to bring forth a lot of good ideas. And if the leader of the state of Arkansas, if that's a priority for who I believe to be Sarah Huckabee Sanders, then it's something you ought to look out for.
Do I color you skeptical, Senator?
No, you do not color me skeptical. I am looking forward to a House, a Senate, and a governor that's looking for pushing us towards a 0% income tax. I feel like Governor Hutchinson has done that. He's moved us in that direction, and we can continue to do more.
Mr. Speaker, an abolition of the income tax, your thoughts?
Well, I think that Senator Hester, has made great points, and to that final point he made, I think we're already on that track, and that we've made significant reductions to the state's income tax during Governor Hutchinson's tenure in office. And so I think for many of us, I think that is something we would like to see happen. I think that, as with so many things, the difficulty is going to be, and the challenge that we have to work through is, what's the timeline for that, and what exactly does that look like? And as Senator Hester said, things cost money, and so we also have to take a look around at what's going on, not just here in the state, but look at what other states have done, because we're not the only state that's has reduced income taxes and is making significant reductions. And so, I think that's something that there'll be much discussion about, but there's a lot of issues surrounding that we will have to work through. But I for one feel like we've already started down that path with the significant tax reductions that we've seen occur over the last 3 to 5 years.
Would I ask, I think both you gentlemen have had conversations with the gentlewoman who is perceived to be the leading candidate for governor. Mr. Speaker, what are your thoughts? How did those conversations go? Tell us everything you can. Leave nothing out.
No, I look forward to working with our next governor. I look forward to working with Governor Sanders, and she's like myself, is a graduate of Ouachita Baptist, and our families have known each other through the years, and certainly known her for some time. And I look forward to the opportunity to work with her, and look forward to her leadership for the state of Arkansas. And so I'm excited about the opportunities presented with the new administration, and I'm excited about the opportunity to lead the House into another regular session.
Senator? So you've had conversations with Ms. Sanders.
We have, not about policy or what we're going to do. We have talked about starting to meet on policy, and I intend to do that. We're going to start meeting hopefully on a routine basis. And I look forward to that. Right? She's got a primary here in about 45 days, which is looking favorable for her. But look, she gets through the primary, we'll talk more, and as November comes, we'll continue to talk more, because I'm very excited about her leadership. I'm very excited about how popular she's going to be in the state of Arkansas, and her ability to maybe lead us through some tough issues with the support of the legislature and the people of Arkansas.
For example, tough issues. For example,
well, like lowering the income tax, right? Lowering it more, finding more options for poor and lower income kids in education.
Well, the social issues consumed a lot of time over the last several sessions. Mm-hmm. They usually do. You expect that to continue? And I'm talking about critical race, abortion, LGBTQ issues.
I think we're always going to talk about social issues, because it's important to the voters of Arkansas. And when we're getting this big a turnover of new members, and a bunch of new members, maybe a third in the Senate come in, they're running, telling the constituents, I'm going to vote pro-life, I'm going to fight for the lives of the unborn, I'm going to fight for these socially conservative issues. So when they show up, they want to do that. They want to deliver on a campaign promise. And so it's not something that we can avoid. We're going to talk about them in Arkansas. We're going to pass some legislation, but we're going to do it in a manner of which I think is respectable to the body and the state of Arkansas.
Senator Hester and Mr. Speaker, we thank you both very much for being with us once again, and we hope you'll come back soon. Please.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet. We conclude by noting a life concluded. Kenister Hodges, best known for the very important year he served as a United States Senator from Arkansas, died a few days ago at age 83. Few, if any, were the days that Kenister Hodges was idle. At various points in his public career, he was chairman of the UA Board of Trustees. He was a trustee of Lyon College, a trustee of the ASU campus in his native Newport. He believed in education, Kenister Hodges, and had a bunch of it himself. Bachelor's degree from Princeton, a couple of master's degrees from Boston, Dallas, and a law degree from Fayetteville. He was a licensed attorney and an ordained minister, a deputy prosecutor, and a game and fish commissioner. But history will remember him primarily as the man appointed to succeed John L. McClellan, who died in 1977 with a year remaining in his Senate term. 5 years earlier, Kenister Hodges had supported McClellan against the man who ran against McClellan, David Pryor, who as governor was the man who appointed Hodges to succeed McClellan. Yeah, this is Arkansas. And that was Kanister Hodges. It was Kanister Hodges who helped give President Jimmy Carter some very important victories, including the Panama Canal Treaty, and at the same time becoming a friend to Ted Kennedy, who tried to defeat Carter. And that was Kanister Hodges. Quite a talent for friendship he had. Quite a life he led. That's it for us this week. See you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.